Welcome to High Performance, the podcast featuring Josh, Phegan and Alexander Phillips. Alexander, today we're going to talk about some important topics around rejection and resilience and becoming really good at what it is that you do as an agent. Alex, when I go around and I talk to a lot of people, there's a few things that come up, and one of the major ones is that people are worried about the rejection of what's going to happen when they get on the phones. And also too, a lot of people talk a little bit about call reluctance and being in a position that, they just, every single day I tend to hit some sort of barrier and then I just get off track and I just don't feel I've got that momentum. So what are some of the things that, people can do to get prepared and how they can really build that level of resilience to be much better at what they do as an agent?
Josh, it's probably because they're not making the right calls. I think, if you're going to be cold calling, you're going to get 99 rejections out of 100, and probably after the first 10, you're going to put down the phone and just forget about making calls and, pushing around your mouse on your notepad on your desk. So to me, I think it's about ensuring that you're going to do calls where you're offering something that someone can benefit, the consumer on the other end of the line can benefit from. You're going to get less rejections in, like i.e., buyer work, offering, obviously really good service around, trying to find them another property, getting understanding what they're after, maybe finding out where they live, do they need other investments, do they need help with renting out their current property. I think if you're doing work like that, the rejections won't be anywhere near as high as if you're just sort of cold calling people. So I think it's also changing your mindset to ensure that you're in your head, you're offering the person on the other end of the line a service they can benefit from. If they don't want it, well, it's their bad luck, go on to the next. I think you just got to get that into your head and move on and just continue on with doing good work on the phone with offering good service.
This is a big thing, I think, for a lot of people. They're so stuck in their own head. They're thinking about them and their own situation that they're not actually out of their head and thinking about the customer. And, someone asked me the other day if I felt that I've worked much in the last 10 years. I said, to be honest, not really, because every day I get up and I just think about how can I help people to be really successful around what they do as a real estate agent. So whether or not you're on stage or in a podcast or you're shooting a video or you're doing something to actually help people, it's fundamentally every single day you go to drive that. And so I want to book the calendar out as much as possible to fulfill the bigger purpose. And I think that if you think about it, the modern consumer today is engineered to say no. They're going to be under attack when they go to open for inspections because they're going to meet a number of agents in that area. And so ultimately, it's the agent that does things just a little bit differently, that builds that level of consistency, that's more about the relationship than trying to sell that particular home, that's the one that's actually going to win. And it's the simple things that you do in terms of dialogue, which is the real connection with that customer, that makes a massive difference in the type of work that we do. Now, we know that people are going to say no because they're in a position that if they said yes, they'd be broke by midday. So from that point of view, you've got to learn to build that level of resilience. In terms of building resilience, you're going to have setbacks in your career. You're going to lose listings. People are going to withdraw properties from the sale. You're going to be in a position that you're going to take a property to auction and you think you're going to sell it on that day and the bidders don't turn up. What are some things that agents can do to get over some of those situations when they happen to them in order to get themselves into a good position of continuing to build a highly productive business?
Yeah, Josh, I think it's cutting out any emotional attachment to what you're doing, and you got to remember, like, the buyers and sellers, it's one of the biggest decisions in their life, but and they're very emotional about what's actually happening in the process and the transaction. Where I think agents that get caught up in that, they also get emotional. They also get down when the property doesn't sell or the vendor says, well, why didn't you do this? And I'm not happy with that. And, why didn't it sell? But you've just got to remember that you're offering a service. It's a business transaction. It's not an emotional, transaction for you as an agent. That's why I see a lot of guys getting caught up, and then obviously it takes them, I think, 3 or 4 days to get over it, which is a whole, week, loss out of obviously, doing other transactions and other deals. So I think it's about ensuring that you always remember that if you know that you're following a good process and you've done everything possible, if it doesn't sell, move on to the next. And there's always people looking at pointing the finger for blame and blaming the agent, and they will do that even if you've done the right thing. So I think it's just sort of getting through to your head that yes, it's their biggest decision, but you're there just to facilitate the transaction.
I think that I'd say this to a lot of people is that, as a great agent, the number one thing that people buy off you is going to be your energy. And that's one of the big things with you, Alex, is that consistency of a really good balanced energy, that whether or not you've won 10 listings or you've lost 5, you can't tell because you're just so in the moment in helping that consumer. And I'd say to people, so what is your renewal that you actually build into your life to ensure that you can keep on track? And so that then comes back down to your diet, because what you eat is how you renew, how the exercise and the sleep, and also to getting in a position that if something rocks you, you jump on the phone and you ring someone who could be a mentor or could actually help you to get out of that situation. So if you've got a negotiation that's going sour or something's gone wrong inside of the business, you don't process it in your head for the next 2, 3, 4 weeks and actually get negative around it. And you get into a position where you kind of stay focused on what counts. And I heard something the other day which I thought was brilliant, which was kill ants. And the conversation here with kill ants was to kill the automatically negative thoughts that enter your mind and be in a position that you're staying that positive, because every single day you will face resistance. You'll get up in the morning, you won't want to go for a run, you won't want to hit the calls, you won't want to be in front of the customer, you won't want to feel like being there on that auction when it's not going to be successful. But you know what? You were the one that got yourself into that position. You're the one that's going to get you out. And that's going to be through good dialogue, better meetings, getting back face to face with the consumer and making some better decisions around it. Obviously, one of the big ones, Alex, in building that resilience is that as you get more successful, you're going to tend to cop bigger blows when things don't happen. How do you handle that as that starts to get more successful? And you might lose 6, 7, or even up to 8 listings in a week at some points in your career. How do you handle a day like that versus someone who can't get over even losing one?
Josh, I'll give you a really good example of something. I think obviously as you get, you're doing more sales and more listings and your personal brand builds, the expectation from those clients just keeps going higher and higher and going through the roof. An example of something yesterday that we've got an auction today that won't sell. A buyer that looked at the property requested a contract at the open home that actually was a next door neighbour. We don't send out contracts until the Monday until we confirm 100% they're interested. Would you like a contract still? Where are you at? Are you a definite buyer? We left 3 messages for that buyer from the time they looked at it to the actual auction. So we did our follow-up call, 10-day call back, and then the auction week call. Yesterday, the owner called that person, knowing that they looked at it, saying, you're coming to the auction. They said, we never received a contract, so we're not. So the minute the vendor heard that, they're on the phone saying, what the hell have you done? You haven't followed the process. There's buyers you've missed. The doubt just went through. And how do you change that? Like what we're saying is totally opposite to what they're thinking. They think, okay, well, who else have they missed? They've just stuffed up the whole campaign. Now, we still haven't got that back on track because we've tried to explain to the vendor we're not sending out contracts until we confirm they're 100% interested, because I think a lot of vendors like to think that they're going to live in hope. So that's a pretty big blow, because they've pretty much said to me yesterday they want to terminate the agreement the day before the auction. So I think where a lot of agents were going into panic mode, we just said to them, well, why don't we run the auction, see what happens tomorrow. If someone's there, they're going to like it. They're going to come up to us and say, we didn't get a contract, or, we'd still like to be kept up to date. And then you can see yourself if there was actually, the process wasn't done correctly. So that's what we're doing today, running the auction, and there won't be anyone there. But they weren't even a buyer for it. But we knew that. The vendor didn't know that, and there's 2 different stories there. And that's a pretty big blow to someone that's saying they're going to tear up the agreement. What have you done? That they were actually fuming over the phone. So, we pulled back from them. We explained what we did. We didn't argue with them. We just said, let's run it to auction. So I think, we didn't go into panic stations. We didn't start go, oh shit, start trying to, smooth it over, saying, I'm so sorry. We'll do whatever we can. We'll throw in a free ad. We'll do, which is something a lot of agents will do. But we just said, well, no, hang on, this is our process. You've given us a business. They didn't, respond to us, and they're not a buyer for it.
And I think that's the most important thing, is to understand that sometimes people are going to do things to upset a campaign, and that could be a competitor, it could be a buyer. And ultimately, if they were a buyer, they're going to be there tomorrow to go and bid. And that's the big challenge, is that it's about actually really understanding the psychology of what's happening in the situation. And I always say this, don't react immediately, pull back, think about it for a couple of minutes before you actually go into battle, and be in that position that you can deliver a message that people can understand, and a message that they can actually accept.